Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the first half of March and the very powerful total lunar eclipse that we have on the 14th, for most people on the 14th, although West Coast America it's going to be very late on the 13th. But this is probably one of the most powerful months, if not the most powerful month of 2025. It's going to be very fast. You'll feel that more in the second half. You'll feel that the intensity will build through the month. You'll feel it even more strongly in the second half. We have two eclipses this month. We have the Aries equinox. We have important retrogrades, which I'll be talking about. We have Neptune entering Aries for the first time. Last time it did that was in April 1861, because it has a 165-year cycle. So there are some very significant transits, and I think we will see a lot of action out in the world, a lot of change on the geopolitical front as well. But there are things happening at very different levels, because with all of the hubbub, the zigzags, the intensity and eventfulness we're going to see at the 3D level, there's a whole other process unfolding, which is about the potential for a major shift in consciousness for humanity. And that's not going to be on the nightly news. That's going to be very quiet. It's going to be very invisible, in fact. So where are you going to put your focus? That's the big question. Always, but it's a very big question for March. So we have a lot of changeable energy in March, really right through the month. And we're going to have this sense of zigzagging, particularly because of the retrogrades, Mercury and Venus, that I'm going to be speaking about. Things seem to be going that way, and then another way, or you're feeling this way, and then suddenly you change your mind. It's that kind of zigzag, which is going to be very tiring if you're focused on the outer, or you're going with the zigzag. So try, as I always say, to find that central place of peace. Find it by dropping into the yogic belly breath. I'll put the video for that below. It's so simple, everybody can do it. Dropping into your heart, just coming back to your center in whatever way is a default method now for you, so you're not living with initially a reference to the outside and that impacting your frequency, but rather the start point is you are dominating your day from your central radio dial of love. And that's a completely different orientation and frequency, as I talked about. I think it was in the last update at the end of the new moon in Pisces that I talked about that in a little more detail. So at the beginning of March, and try and drop into the heart, not the head, as an ongoing principle. We're moving out of the head as a very long-term process, much more into the heart. So let your discernment come from the heart rather than the head. And also we're going to be really quite intuitive this month. This is a very, very Piscean energy that we're dealing with, because right at the start of the month we have the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, and the North Node all in Pisces. And I think we're all aware of Pisces energy. It's dreamy, it's drifty, it can be extremely creative, extremely intuitive. It can also, because it's so sensitive, easily feel overwhelm or confusion, or I don't know who I am and where I'm going. That kind of sense of I just can't cope with the daily world, that kind of thing. So really try and use your creativity. If you're feeling those things, either go into meditation, go into breath work, do something creative, because the big principle with all challenging planetary transits is that if we use up the energy consciously and positively, there is less energy, whatever the transit, that can manifest negatively. The music has to play somehow, so let us consciously use it up positively rather than negatively. And for Pisces, that's spirituality, creativity, imagination. But right at the beginning, on the 2nd of March, we have Neptune conjunct Mercury, and we have the Sun square to Jupiter. Now, this is wonderful for your imagination, your big picture dreaming, your big plans for the future, your big ideas. What are you dreaming in? That's a really big theme for March, actually, with everything that's going on. What are you dreaming in? What's the next dream for you? And Mercury conjunct Neptune is incredibly imaginative and creative. So wonderful for writing fiction, poetry, that kind of thing. It is also can easily feel confused and overwhelmed. So remember what I've just said about how to play the music positively. Also, right from the beginning of the month, we have Venus moving retrograde. Now, Venus moves retrograde about every 18 months for 40 days. And she normally spends, when she's moving forwards, around 4 weeks in each sign. But because of the retrograde, the extended retrograde, she's going to be spending 3 months in Aries and about 2 months in Pisces. So this area of your chart, I really would like you to look at. Venus starts to move retrograde from the beginning of March at 10 degrees of Aries. See where that falls in your chart, because she's going to retrograde right back to 24 of Pisces by the 13th of April. So really observe where that's falling in your chart, which house area. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to the link below, buy a 2-part video series that it takes you from zero. You can watch forever, as often as you like, to explain what the orientation of your chart, where these planets are falling with every update I do, and what it means for you and your life. This is not a personalized birth chart analysis. These are teaching videos, but people love them because it really is the beginning of your astrological journey. So see where 10 degrees of Aries retrograding back to 24 of Pisces falls in your chart. Now, if you think back to March 2017 to mid-April 2017, Venus was covering, in retrograde motion, pretty much the same ground, from 13 of Aries back to 26 of Pisces. So pretty much the same degrees as she is going to be covering this time around. So what happened? This would be in the same area of life for you. What happened March, early April 2017? Because that will give you an idea of what's likely to come up again this time, and it'll be vortexing upwards from whatever you were experiencing in 2017. And so this is a process of reevaluation. Venus is to do with our values, very much connected to relationship, because she's the planet of love. So for many of us, we are reevaluating relationships, and this can be romantic relationships classically, it can be old partners suddenly reappearing, it can be even relationships with female friends as well, female partners, female friends. It's about financial matters. I think we could see, because we've also got Mercury retrograde, which I'll talk about in a moment, I think we could see a lot of volatility in the financial markets this month and into April. And you may be thinking about, if this is falling in your 2nd house or your 8th house. The 8th house is to do with how you invest your money, if you have any money to invest. There could be a reevaluation around that. Or is Venus, through these degrees, falling in your 10th house? Are you reevaluating your career in some way? Or your 5th house, your romantic relationships? Or your 4th house, your home? What are you thinking about your home? Are you less settled, perhaps, than you used to be? It's to do with your appearance, your beauty. So it may bring up a feeling of things are kind of hollow or stale or deadening or repetitive. just observe, because Venus will also be crossing this point again in May. So you don't have to act precipitously, you just have to observe, and that's a good plan rather than feeling that you need to make a decision or to act now. I'm a great believer, as you know, of the eagle's perch position on many issues. And so also this is reinforced by, of course, Uranus moving through the last few degrees of Taurus, because Taurus is ruled by Venus. So again, radical review, Uranus, radical changes in your value system. So just observe all of these things, but we are reevaluating, particularly around the relationship area and to a large degree the financial area too, where we want to go from this point forwards. Now, what's interesting as well is that Venus in its retrograde motion on the 27th of March moves out of Aries into Pisces. So it crosses that zero of Aries. So just observe, is there anything coming up in the world at that point as Venus crosses that? It could be something financial. But Venus is also very much activating 9 degrees of Aries. And it's doing that particularly from the 8th to the 10th of March. You might want to write some of these dates down because I'm going to be covering a lot of dates. Now, 9 degrees of Aries is where we are going to have an important solar eclipse on the 29th of March. So Venus, and Mercury is going to do this too, as I'll explain in a moment. Venus is activating that upcoming eclipse point for the solar eclipse on the 29th of March. Mercury is also moving retrograde at a very similar time over almost identical degrees. So Mercury starts to move retrograde on the 15th of March at 9 degrees of Aries. Venus starts at 10 degrees. Mercury is doing this from 9 degrees. Crosses 0 degrees of Aries on the 30th as it retrogrades back into Pisces. And it stays retrograde until the 7th of April when it is at 26 degrees of Pisces. So Venus retrogrades to 24 of Pisces, Mercury retrogrades to 26. So roughly the same time scale, but very much the same degrees being covered. And of course, these are also very similar degrees to where we have Neptune and the last few degrees of its sign, where we have the North Node, where we have Saturn coming up to those degrees as well. This is a hyper-activated area of your chart. Those last few degrees of Pisces and the early degrees of Aries. So with Mercury, it's more of a thinking process. Whenever we have a retrograde planet, use the letters RE, reevaluating with Venus, and that's in a more feeling, emotional sense. With Mercury, it's going to be rethinking and going back over, but it's going to be in the same house area, the same area of life. Mercury is linked to our friends, to our siblings. Are we reevaluating many of our friendships, which I think most of us are, because we're not all moving the same way, at the same pace, and that's absolutely no judgment. We're all on our individual journey. But there's a kind of reassessment, I think, of many relationships and teaming up with new people. And that's absolutely fine. You don't necessarily continue with the same people for your whole journey, only part of the journey so often. So also Mercury is linked to trade and tariffs. So I think this retrograde of Mercury will also have impact potentially on the financial markets. And I do think, as I said at the beginning, we're going to see some geopolitical changes through, particularly as we get later into the month. So not only that, but as I say, Neptune and the North Node are also in this same area than the last few degrees of Pisces. Now, the North Node was last in this area for the second half of 2006. So go back, again, same areas of life, go back to what was happening in the second half of 2006. Again, which house area? Was it your home? Was it your health? Was it your career? What was it? Because there's going to be an echo, there's going to be some kind of a repeat this time around. Neptune, as I mentioned, hasn't been in this area since about 1860. Moved out of Pisces in April 1861, so none of us are that old to remember the last time. But these are very, very significant transits. And because Pisces is the last degree of the zodiac, this is so much about endings. Personal endings, global endings, world endings. And I think we can all feel that and see that very clearly. It's not the end of the world at all. I think it's very exciting, actually, but it's certainly the end of a world which is crumbling and cracking, and the old structures are falling away. And I think we can all witness that very clearly. But the crumbling and the cracking will get louder but more hollow, as I've often said before. So, also, wherever these last few degrees of Pisces are falling, with all of these planets being so activated there, there's a sense of idealism, there's a sense of dreaming, and what are you yearning for in that area of life? What are you yearning for? Are you yearning for some new friends, new relationship, romantic relationship, yearning for a new career, yearning for a new home, yearning for some travel? Yearning is a really good word for Pisces and Neptune in Pisces. And at best, this should prompt a connection to the divine, the ethereal, the elemental, to source. And it's really beautiful, to the mystical, to the magical, and to the invisible. This is all the stuff we can't see, but is a connection to source that we can't write on a spreadsheet. But it is the most important thing in our lives, that connection to source and our sense of divinity. And it's a sense of a divine flow. You know, I've been talking about this sense of divine surrender, which Anne Tucker has been talking about in her angel messages too, this sense of divine surrender, not as an act of resignation or despair, but as a very conscious and positive act of connection to the divinity of all that is, this sense of oneness. And that's very, very different indeed. So eclipses only happen when the new moons and full moons happen close to the nodal axis. And we know that the current nodal axis up until July 2026 is in Virgo and Pisces. Virgo is where the south node is falling, what we're kind of moving away from, and Pisces is the north node. So there's a sense of it, and I've got a whole video on this transiting nodal axis, and so I'll put the link for that below. But this is a process very often of simplifying, of kind of feng shui. That's very linked to the Virgo energy as well. It's a strong sense of discernment with many choices coming up in our life. And there's a sense with this nodal axis of reconnecting to the sacredness of the earth and the ancient wisdom of the earth, and a remembrance of those practices. And also a kind of birthing of a different sense of your service to the world. For those of you who feel you are in service for the world, there may be a reorientation in terms of how is that changing? How is that shifting? Because all of us are starting to birth a new episode because of the very powerful astrology of all of the outer planets moving sign. And here we're looking at Neptune moving out of Pisces at the end of March. Virgo Pisces, as I've mentioned before, is also about the health axis. And I think this is really big for the next 18 months up until July 2026. I think health will come up as a major issue. And I'd suggest that everybody needs to improve their health. Everybody. In whatever way you can, whether it's taking more exercise, whether it's cleaning up your diet, whether it's doing some fasting, whether it's a detox, whether it's taking other supplements, whatever it is, just really be in as optimum health as you can be going into this next 18-month period. And Virgo is very connected to the gut, the microbiome, where, of course, your health really begins. You've got to have that microbiome thriving. And the Pisces end is linked to blood and overall our immune system. So I think a lot is going to come up because that axis stays there until July 26. A lot of issues are going to come up about health in all kinds of ways. Now, health is one of the themes that is very emphasized at this total lunar eclipse that we're going to take a look at in a moment. And also later in the year, in September, 21st of September, we have another total lunar eclipse in Virgo as well. This is very close. I was talking about 2006 a moment ago, and these two lunar eclipses in this month, March and September, are very close in degree, almost identical to the ones that we had in 2006. There was one in March 2006 at 24 Virgo. This is about 3 minutes away from 24 Virgo. And the one in September, 22nd of September 2006, was at 29 of Virgo. So, really, really close. So again, go back, what was happening? Because what eclipses do, they're like wild cards. Things can often come out of the blue that are very unexpected. Lunar eclipses tend to be because they're like very big full moons, they're very connected to closure, completion, culmination, the ends of episodes, particularly because this is also a south node eclipse. Because the lunation, in this case the full moon, has to be closest to either the north node or the south node. The north node is our collective soul's path of growth that we're heading towards in our future, and the south node is the past. So this emphasizes endings, this emphasizes closures. And so, the importance of this in terms of what is just complete in your life, or shutting down, or over. You've done it. There's no more energy for that now. But at the same time, you're already feeling the yearnings, the pulls, the dreams, the messages towards another level of episode, I would say. Also being aware with this total lunar eclipse, where have we been a victim is strong. This nodal axis being very emphasized. Where have we lived in victimhood, in relationships or in the world, and deferred to external authority figures? That's a really big one as we go through this whole shift in consciousness. And it's going to bring up all of the Pisces themes, or some of the Pisces themes for you. It's about the veils that we've lived behind, the disillusionment, the veils falling away, the lies, the deceptions, whatever they were or are, becoming much more obvious as truth comes to light. It's about drugs and addictions. It's about pharmaceutical drugs. It's about the media. It's about oil, seas, oceans, fishing, shipping, toxicity of all kinds, tsunamis, flooding, all of those kinds of things. It's also, in a very positive sense, about dreaming, poetry, music, creativity in general, imagination, and bliss. See how often you can drop into bliss in your day. I can do this despite the massive workload. I can actually drop into bliss very easily. If I'm in nature and just stopping, and as I did this morning, sat on this massive kind of granddaddy beech tree And it's just the very beginning of spring here, and it's the time I just love the most, where you're starting to feel the electrical life force coming through, and the tiny shimmers of lime green of the new leaves coming through. And the force, that life force, is extraordinary, especially because we welcome it so much after our winters in the UK. But it's that feeling of childlike wonder and awe, and that's when I can drop into bliss. Just go, wow, this is so incredibly beautiful. And I never tire of it after all these years. It's still like the first time as a child. It's really beautiful. So see if you can cultivate that kind of beginner's mind, if you like, that beginner's view. So eclipses usually bring permanent changes into our life as well. And remember, this isn't just for the day, 13th, 14th of March. It's actually, we're already into the energy of this eclipse right now, and we will feel the consequences of it, the manifestations of it, up to 6 months after. So that's why this activated area of your chart is so important to observe. Also, I'd say with this total lunar eclipse, try and move away. This is the Virgo South Node. Move away from the kind of worry-warting, because Virgo, in its shadow expression, can be the worry-wart of the zodiac. You know, the anxiety over the little things in life, the perfectionism, 99% is never good enough, that self-criticism, and try and just get into this kind of divine surrender, surrendering to the divine flow of life. And you can't measure that. It's just, as I say, invisible. It's unmeasurable. But boy, is it absolutely vital to your state of being, absolutely foundational to your state of being. And this is going to get stronger as we move forwards. Tune into your intuitions, tune into your dreams, keep a dream journal, super important for this Pisces period. And all of March, Neptune is going to be at the final degree of Pisces, the anoretic degree. So again, all the things I've spoken about, there may be more flooding, there may be more tsunamis, but it can also manifest as a huge wave of compassion, or a lot of emotional overwhelm. I'm getting a lot of emails from people right now who are feeling that, just can't find a way through. But I'm, hopefully going to talk more about that as we move through. So Neptune in the very final whispers of Pisces, the very final degrees of the zodiac, can create this sense of void or vacuum or limbo, or we can't find our footing, our foundations seem to be crumbling. Just know that's part of the planetary unfolding, that you are meant to feel that way to some degree, because I can see it so clearly in astrology. We are meant to be feeling this sense of the ending, and we'll feel that individually to different degrees. But allow the messages in your dreams to come through in terms of what new part of you is opening up, what's being birthed, how is the expansion of your consciousness, your increased psychic sensitivity perhaps, allowing you to detect some other gift in you that is just being stirred now. This is the time when the caterpillar decides it is the moment to go into the chrysalis and liquidize. Nobody tells the caterpillar that. That's divine timing, according to that particular caterpillar. It's the same for us right now. We are going through the divine timing of metamorphosis, and we are in the early stages of that right now. And it's a one-way process, as I say. So now let me look at the chart for, because I've talked a lot already. Let me look at the chart for the total lunar eclipse. So this is happening 14th of March, 6:56 in the morning in England. Always set the chart for England because this is where I live. Obviously, East Coast America, you're going to be feeling that in the very early hours. West Coast, you're going to be feeling it very late on the 13th. But ignore the clock face, ignore the houses. We're just going to be focused on the planets and their aspects to each other. So I've talked a lot about these planets in Pisces and all the retrogrades we're going to have between Mercury and Venus. We have Neptune here, still conjunct the North Node. And this is really talking about, if this is our collective path of soul's growth for our future, this has to be birthed within a spiritual context. Neptune in Pisces. This has to be birthed within a spiritual context. And so, but of course, from now on, because the nodes always move retrograde, the nodes will continue to move back in Pisces as Neptune on the 30th of March moves out of Pisces into Aries. And that's going to be a big deal. And all astrologers are going to be talking about that, including myself. So an aspect I haven't spoken about yet is the fact that Saturn is very, very tightly conjunct the Sun here. Just sort of not even 2 degrees. I have to say this total lunar eclipse is smack on my Sun to the minute. So this will be an interesting time for me. So Saturn is conjunct the Sun and opposing the Moon. Now, when we get this is about a reality check. We've got all this wafty, dreamy, intuitive Piscean energy, but let's get real. What's really happening? What's really happening around health? What's really happening around things like toxicity, pollution, plastics, very linked to Pisces, oils, oil spillage, that kind of thing. Let's get real. And there could be water issues, as I say, with that line up in Pisces. And so, yes, all of those things I've talked about, any lies, any deceptions, any drug issues, any health issues, immune issues, etc. So, but it does give great potential for structuring our creativity in a bigger way, in a better way. So maybe that you, as well as booking appointments for your stillness meetings for yourself, you set aside very specific times in the day when that's your creative time. You know, people do this when they're writing books. I did this when I was writing my books, you know, that for a certain set number of hours, boom, that was my meeting with myself to write, non-negotiable. So this is about structuring our creativity as well. Now, I don't necessarily see this as Saturn conjunct the Sun and opposing the Moon. I hope not anyway, in my case, but as being exceptionally difficult. But there is a sense of we need to ground the inspiration and the creativity that's coming in. So it doesn't just be here one day and gone the next. There's a sense of grounding it in something realistic, pragmatic, and long-term. And what will help us, I think, actually, is that Mars is trine to the Sun and sextile, a little bit wide on the sextile, but certainly trine the Moon and trine Saturn. So this will give us the discipline to do what I've just been talking about, help to energize it. Having said that, Mars remains out of bounds until the 7th of April. So it still has this wild, out of control feeling that I think we can see very obviously in the world, actually. So it's an untamed Mars. But nevertheless, it can still energize the Sun and Saturn in their endeavors to give greater structure to our creativity. This total lunar eclipse can really bring in, I think, the mystical and the magical as well. Open yourself to that. So our sensitivity to suffering, I think, will be great at that time. A lot of empathy as well, potential, when if there's any big issue in the world, any sort of extreme weather event, we are really going to feel with the people in that situation. And think of this total lunar eclipse as I mentioned simplifying earlier. There's a sense of simplifying, but also a sense of purity. Um, in this sense of remembrance and reconnecting to the sacred wisdom of the earth, connecting to all the life forms, connecting to ancient herbal medicine, telepathy with all living beings. It's that kind of a mystical merging feeling that I think could come about at this total lunar eclipse. It can be very, very magical and mystical. It can be really very special. So I'm going to stop sharing here and talk about the eclipse path and the astrocartography. So it's always helpful to look at the eclipse path. Where is the path of the eclipse? Because very often that is where a lot of the news comes from in the months to come, just before but also after the eclipse. And maybe no surprise that and you can look this up online, that the totality of this eclipse includes all of North America. So a lot happening in North America. It also covers, the totality covers western half of South America. So when I say that, it means totality will be visible from these geographies. All of North America, western half of South America. We will see it partially over the UK, Europe, most of Africa, Australia, Asia, Arctic and Antarctic. So very wide geographies there. If I'm looking at the astrocartography, and this is different, this is where if the planets were to leave a shadow across the Earth, where would they be angular? And if you're not very expert in astrology, just ignore the next minute or so because it's going to get too complicated to explain. But essentially, if you set up a chart, if you cast a chart for each of the geographies I'm going to mention, you would see the planets I'm going to mention as being angular: ascendant, midheaven, descendant, IC. So I hope that makes sense. And that's when they come into greater power, greater potency. And again, as I've said in the past, not all of these geographies will come to prominence, but it is likely that some of them will, because the energy is most activated there. So in terms of this total lunar eclipse itself, the Sun, Moon, and Saturn run straight through central Mexico, the US, and Canada. Again, that geography picked up on the eclipse path. Also, in a different area of the world, falling straight through Kazakhstan, India, and Western China. Uranus is conjunct the midheaven, going straight through Central Australia and Japan. And the midheaven tends to be leadership or government. The Uranus is conjunct the IC, the land, the base of the land in Brazil. And it's conjunct the ascendant running through California. Pluto is conjunct the midheaven through Eastern Europe and Egypt. So some very extensive geographies there. So we will just observe, get into that observer's practice, because it's so, so helpful for so many areas of your life. This is yogic practice. Just observe, don't react, don't plunge in, don't speak before you think. That quality of take a breath, that quality of mindfulness that I think is so helpful to develop with all of this Pisces energy. So there's going to be a lot happening in the world, a lot of zigzagging, a lot of crazies, and that will make us contract at the 3D level. If we're watching the nightly news, if we're following the narrative, we're going to be zigzagging, we're going to be exhausted, and we're going to be contracting. We're going to be going into fear, anxiety, panic. When will it end? We're going to be contracting. It would be best if we could play the music with all this beautiful Piscean energy to feel a sense of spaciousness, a sense of our consciousness expanding. We're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. Think of that rolling mantra that I suggest for our free 15-minute meditations every night. And again, I'll put the link for that below. So don't write to me, just watch the video. No Zoom, no tech, no links, no nothing. What I also want to say is things are happening at very different levels. 10 tons of action, crazy action in our 3D world in March and ongoing. A completely different unfolding is happening at the consciousness level. And I'm going to be having some very exciting conversations this week. I think a couple of them are going to be recorded conversations about this potential jump in consciousness that is available for all of us, every single one of us. That is really exciting. Invisible, unmeasurable, intangible. But which end of the spectrum are you going to focus on? You're going to focus on. You can't focus on both ends of the spectrum at the same time. I'm going to be focusing on the expanded consciousness and the reconnection to nature and ancient wisdom and connecting to all the beings. That's where I'm going. But it's up to each of you to decide for yourselves. This is a big choice point in March, a really big choice point. You may feel it even more intensely, I think, late March, early April. But as I say, I'm going to be having a couple of conversations, and I'm talking about the first week in March here, that I hope will be really helpful for you in explaining those a little more fully. So, God bless. I hope that's helped. And I didn't say at the beginning, but yeah, welcome to all of the new subscribers. And I'll have a lot of a wide variety of videos on this channel. So I hope some of them are helpful to you. So God bless. Have a wonderful lunar eclipse in Virgo on the 13th, 14th of March. And I'll be back very soon with another video later this week. God bless. Bye for now.